other than Mr. Dustin Olson.
It's great to be here, Daniel. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome, Mr. Dustin on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Absolutely. So I've been in politics and in advertising and in research for about 26 years or so, and started right out of college, actually in college. And first experience I had was actually working in the Bush White House. Following the recount and an epic election, and is a low guy on the totem pole as a intern, but then later on, a few years after working in both government and on campaigns, started my company, Olson Strategies and Advertising, in 2006, and have been working we do a lot of political advertising, but over the years have expanded into business. And back in 2022, we bought a small market research company and a call center, and we created American Pulse Research and Polling, and that's been around since then. And we specialize in doing market research for all sorts of different kinds of organizations, from lawyers who need to understand the jury to consultants who need to understand the marketplace and whether people will buy their product, like for Bain and Company or McKinsey or one of those kinds of groups. So anyway, we do all sorts of market research, and we find it to be very fulfilling and a great way to help our clients get more customers.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Dustin. Thank you. And today let's talk about using market research, polling data analytics to understand your customers. In an era obsessed with big data, what critical things can only be learned about customers through qualitative human-centric research, and how do you protect the insight from being drawn out by the quantitative noise?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. One of the things that we do, it starts with asking good questions and asking of the people who matter, and that's your audience. It's your customers. If you're running for office, it's your voters. That's who we want to talk to. So, being a pollster is a little bit different than just being a typical market researcher. One of the things that we do, because those are basically the same thing, market research or polling. We just use different terms for the different industries. But the nice thing about polling is that you get to have uh, the election every 2 years or every 4 years to find out if your research actually was accurate. And then 2024, for the political races that we tracked, we had a 98% accuracy rate, and it's pretty remarkable. So that we predicted who won those races, and they were within the margin, 98% within the margin of error also. So that was pretty remarkable, and it lets us know that what we're doing is making a difference. So when I think about market research, I think about my client and like what their strengths are. Imagine a Venn diagram. You have your strengths, and then you have your competitor and maybe what their weaknesses are and what they what people may not like about them. But then you think about your audience and what they care about, what's important to them, and where those three circles overlap. That's really the place that you want to focus. That's what I call the Olson strategy sweet spot. And this is based on, this is book 101 review. One of the most important books for me in my development was Sun Tzu's Art of War. And one of his maxims is attack what is weak and avoid what is strong. And so if you focus on the area where you're strong, your opposition, your competitors are weak, and it matters to voters or it matters to customers, that is always going to be the battlefield that you want to be doing battle on. You don't even have to talk about your opponents. Just by getting people to focus on the thing where you're strong and they're weak and people care about it, you are always going to be making a good case for yourself. So when we ask questions in our surveys, That's ultimately what we're trying to find out is what do people think is a strength of yours? What do they think is a weakness of your competitors? And what does it matter to them? Sometimes they might think you're strong on something. They might think your competitors are weak on something, but they don't really care that much. So we want to find out, do they care? And is it going to be something that drives their decisions? So that's when we create our research, that's what we do. And those are the kinds of insights that we derive from it.
Very well said, Mr. Dustin, and thank you for the recommended book. And I always ask good question for a good result. Many
Yep.
companies treat research as one-time proof for a decision they are already made. How do you cultivate a culture where customer data and insight are allowed to be truly surprising and challenge internal assumptions?
That's an excellent question because uh, that is very often what people do. I've actually had consultants tell me before that they they create their research ultimately to be able to tell their client what they want to tell them. And we do not take that approach. We take the approach of the audience is going to tell us what matters. We want to ask good questions that maybe has the audience think about things a little bit differently than maybe they've thought about before, present new information. One of the things I've learned as a pollster and a market researcher is that the public at large is actually very smart, and this is something that a lot of professionals may not agree with me on, but I think that the public is very smart and they're insightful. They may not have all the information. Sometimes they may be ignorant of some topic or some issue or some product, but when you present them with the facts, they can discern things pretty well. And so there's a lot of wisdom that you can glean, and if you are trying to just use research as a way to persuade someone to do something that you already wanted them to do, then you are giving up on getting some of that wisdom from the greater public. So that's what we're ultimately doing. And one of the ways we do that oftentimes is we ask open-ended questions so that maybe we don't even know what the exact question is to ask. So we'll ask an open-ended question that allows people to um, just tell us in their own words what they think. And this is really interesting because with the advent of AI, we are able to take a lot of responses. In the last year, we had a survey that we did where we ended up with about 14,000 what we call verbatim responses, people in their own word. That's exactly what they said. And that is way too much information for one human to go and look at. But now with AI, we can, in a consistent way, be able to get a sentiment analysis of all those comments and be able to find out, you know, what were the kind of the positive sentiments where there is a commonality, a common thread, and we can really pull out the wisdom from the public. And it was very useful. This is something that we couldn't do even a couple of years ago, but ultimately, yeah, we want to make sure that we're getting what is really truly important to the audience because, as I said, with that Venn diagram with your strengths, your opponent's weaknesses, and what people care about. Um, if your research isn't focused on what people care about, then you're going to miss the boat.
Very well said, Mr. Dustin. So, what's a specific example where the data told a clear, logical story, but your gut or a deeper human insight told you something was off? How
Yeah.
did you resolve the tension?
Well, this is something that I happen like almost every single time I do a survey. I find out. So I put together the what we call a survey instrument. So we draft, all these questions, and I have an idea of kind of where I want the survey to go, and I have questions I want to ask. And I'm always surprised. We do a pretty good job. 90% of the questions usually work out really well, but there's about 10% that I find out that the responses that we get, we really didn't learn anything. And that tells me that obviously I didn't understand exactly what mattered to those people before we went into the field. So it's a bit humbling, but it's also good because it says that we actually learned something from the public that those sets of questions weren't actually important to them. So we can avoid those topics or those, whatever um, your product's features are, or those may not be as important to the public as some of the other things. So it is humbling to find that out, but it's also extremely valuable when we do that. One of the things that happens when you do a survey, very often you'll find out that there is one piece of information that is, you maybe had a hunch that it was going to be extremely important and persuasive to somebody, but you find out that nothing else even touches it. So what we do is we ask questions: Are you um, strongly or very likely to support um, something or prefer something? Or are you somewhat likely or somewhat um, interested in a feature? And then we do somewhat unlikely and very unlikely. So we have this gradation that we do in our questions, and we want to look for that intensity on the very or the strongly. And we look at that, like if those numbers pop, and sometimes there's things you have 10 features for a product that you think are all great, and the public thinks they're great too, but there's a lot of intensity on one of them. All of a sudden, we now don't have to worry about all those other features. We don't have to be confused about what to focus on. We don't have to confuse the public or the customer with providing them with a lot of information. We now know that there's one aspect of this product or one aspect of this candidate that really is persuasive to the audience, and then we can focus on it. And that happens frequently. And in a political campaign, for instance, you find out one vote in particular had a big impact on the opposition. So the opposition voted a certain way, and the public does not like that, and they're willing to remove that person from office or not vote for them because of that topic. I can't give specifics because of its client
Mhm.
information, but that's a pretty frequent occurrence.
Interesting, Mr. Dustin. So let's talk about the connecting data to human behavior. Data shows us what people do, but when fails on the why, can you share a technique or a story where you successfully bridge that gap, moving from a compelling data point to a profound human motivation?
Well, I when I think about my research, I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure a lot of the viewers are familiar with. We have you know the first thing that we absolutely need is oxygen, and we need food and water, then we need shelter, and we need belonging. So there's a continuum of the things that we need. And oftentimes when something's extremely motivating to an audience, to voters, or to customers, it's because the what's behind their motivations is higher up on that hierarchy of needs. For instance, there's a famous case in the United States, in Michigan, where the city of Flint, they had water that was contaminated. That affected, I believe, it was the incumbent governor. I believe lost his reelection because of that issue. That is that gets pretty high up on the needs. It's water is, I think, the second need for the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this is these are the kinds of things that matter to people. It's why crime oftentimes is a pretty big motivating thing. Keeping your family safe. If you sell home security systems, this is something that matters to people, keeping their family safe. So really, you're looking for those important big motivating needs that people have. Also values, like what is the value that these people hold. Oftentimes uh, there is a need to look good, there's a need to avoid looking bad, there's a need to There's a desire to take care of your family. There is a desire to have freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of just of to be comfortable. There's some sort of bigger value idea that's usually behind most human motivation, and that has an impact in how people make decisions. And I can't hear you right now. It looks like it's muted.
Thank you, Mr. Dustin. So let's talk about the pitfalls and biases. Navigating the minefield. What is the most dangerous or costly cognitive bias you see leaders or teams fall into when interpreting customer data, and how do you help them avoid it?
That's a great question because it's very much the case that people are that they do suffer from biases. Actually, research in general helps break through a lot of those biases. So I'll just tell you the way the process typically works with us is we start off with creating the survey instrument, creating the questionnaire. Now, ultimately, we are really important to helping people understand their strategy because just in the drafting of that document, we have because we can't have people on the phone or have them responding to a text survey or any of that. We can't have them doing that for 30 minutes. We have to do it in a certain time frame. So you have to start making choices. And I believe the essence of strategy is choice, that you have to be able to choose between this thing or that thing. So we start having them ultimately come up with what's important to them and what they really think that they need to understand. So that is a clarifying process that they start doing that. Now, what oftentimes breaks their biases if they have it that they were going to go a certain way. When the information comes back, it might confirm what their biases were, and like actually truly the public is aligned with where they thought things were. But what also happens is if it doesn't align with it, I often find within an organization where you usually have a few people who have different approaches. They all want to go different, there might be some different directions. You have a board or something. What happens with research is that you have 400, 500, 1,000, 2,000 people who've participated in the survey, and there's a clear majority or plurality that have a certain perspective, and maybe there's an intensity behind that perspective. It has a tendency of breaking those biases that people might have within your your group that you have to persuade to take direction and develop a strategy. When they see that a plurality to a majority of the public, of your audience, of the customers believe one thing, it has oftentimes their biases they've kind of fall away, and there's a clarity there that happens because there's a social proof based off of a lot of people saying, no, we think this, and that has people oftentimes align around the strategy much better than they would have otherwise. And we often find they do sometimes will end up doing exactly what they wanted to do in the beginning. However, they now have confidence that this is the right approach. They now know that the landscape and the environment and ultimately their customers, the voters, whoever, there that it makes sense, and they have confidence in their strategy. But I do find that the clarifying nature of that information does help people step outside of their biases.
Confidence indeed. So, Mrs. Dustin, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Oh, that's a great question for me. Well, my long term goals is to ultimately uh, have a positive impact on the world, and to be a thought leader who brings a new kind of perspective. So ultimately, whenever I'm talking to someone like you, Daniel, or I'm talking like on network news or presenting information, I ultimately want to be the voice for the American people, oftentimes in our surveys, or for the greater public, because they don't oftentimes get to have their voice heard um, in media. So if I'm on, let's say, Fox News or CNN, I want to give voice to the people who've answered our surveys and say, this is what the American public think. This is what um, people in this country think. That's what I want to do, is be able to give voice to the people who normally don't get to have the opportunity to be on TV. Um, then additionally, what I want to do is be able to offer a new context, a new frame for people to see things that maybe gives them a little bit more freedom and a little bit of a bigger view than what they had before. So they have a better understanding for how things actually work. Because ultimately, what I see in this world is that there is a constant um, unseen war for your mind, a propaganda war. People are always trying to have you see the world from their filter, and there's all sorts of stuff going on with people trying to, influencers who are hired to get a certain message out there, and just the way the media works. My goal is to give people a bit of a understanding for how things really work, to pull back the curtain such that they are not as easily manipulated by what happens in the media, and that they have a little bit more freedom and a better understanding of how the world really works. So that's my long-term goal. The short-term goal right now, one of the things that we're launching at American Pulse, is we have our polling club. And we have a newsletter that people have been on for a while, but we've now created a polling club community. So if people go to pollingclub.com, you can sign up to be part of that community, and you can actually give us influence. You can influence the questions that we ask in our public surveys. So if you would like us to talk about, I don't know, crypto or artificial intelligence, and ask people what their thoughts are on that, you can suggest that as a topic for one of our next surveys. If you want to see our most recent survey, you can get that if you're part of the free. If you're part of the paid, you can have access to our archive of surveys that we've done over the years. And you can look at everything from national security to economic issues, like all of the market trends that we've tracked. You have access to that, and it's a pretty reasonable price, under $20 a month. So that's the thing that we're doing in the near term. And of course, you can just become a free member at pollingclub.com, so people can do that. And when you do that, I mentioned Sun Tzu's Art of War is an important book to me. I wrote a preface to the Lionel Giles edition, and that's available as an audiobook, as a PDF, and for your Kindle and whatnot. So you can get that if you sign up as a free member for Polling Club. So people can check that out at pollingclub.com.
Yes, and thank you for that goal, and looking forward for more success and good luck, Mr.
Awesome.
Dustin.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. It's great to be on here, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Definitely, indeed. So, before I wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in a third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season too, comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well, geography 101, love letters, a movie 101 review, music 101 of fifth season, science 101, sex 101 in its fourth season, spiritual awakening, trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, entrepreneurship 101, and of course my Bible verses 101 are my baby podcast. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Dustin, after all your work, what is studying customer data and behavior taught you most about people in general? What is a universal truth you observe?
Well, the one I mentioned is that when people are presented with information, humans are pretty smart, and that there is a wisdom in the greater public. Also, that strategy does matter, and that you really do want to be clear about what your goals are and where you're going, and success can come from that.
Success indeed. So, Mr. Dustin, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. So go to americanpulse.us if you'd like to start a market research project, do a survey. If you'd like to do a poll, go to americanpulse.us or join our polling club at pollingclub.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Dustin Olson, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering survey will rise. I have one more question, Mr. Dustin. With the advent of AI and predictive analytics, and uniquely human skills will become more, not less, critical for the researchers and analysts of the future.
Yeah, no, it will. One of the things that's a bit troubling is that instead of talking to real people, there's a trend that people are asking AI to come up with what people's opinions are. And eventually, you're going to start to not be actually talking to real people, but talking to AI as opposed to getting the public's real opinions. That's a trend that's happening right now. But ultimately, if you just call people up and talk to them as real people, that's really the place you can get some great insights.
Real people and authentic people, for sure. So, if you could instill one principle in every executive's mind about using data to understand customers, what would it be?
Well, first of all, is that you want to do research. You want to understand what matters to people. It's all about what matters to your customer, what matters to voters. It's really about locating yourself in their world, understanding their world. But you might have a vision that other people don't quite see. Have confidence in where you want to go, and you know, if it doesn't necessarily come back with the research that you think that you really want, go ahead and take your action. Do the thing that you think that you want to do and change the world.
Indeed, that changed the world. And my last question, Mr. Dustin, in a climate of increasing consumer skepticism around data privacy, how do you conduct a meaningful research while building rather than eroding trust?
Well, we definitely focus on confidentiality, and all surveys are done with anonymity. That's really important, and having real people talk to real people. That's one of the neat things we have. We have real live interviewers, people who are trained to do this, and they talk to real people. We actually find that we get more young people to answer the phone and talk to a real person than we do by text or using online polls. And the reason for that is they just don't have that experience very often. The real person calls them up and asks them their opinion.
Mr. Dustin Olson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you so
Awesome.
much
Thank you,
for your
Daniel.
time.
Appreciate it.
Marticon people, see you